As the prophet of esports, I rely on trustworthy and meaningful data every day. Data from our research partner YouGov offers the most complete view of esports fans and gamers in the world, providing context to who they are, what they think, the brands they buy, and things they do. YouGov's connected insights and research services inform strategy at every level. If you're a team, a brand, agency, or rights holder, you should be talking with YouGov. Their partners measure and maximize ROI and are telling compelling stories with data. Visit yougov.com/gaming-esports to learn more. Okay, hold on. So I'm going to give you one other story to talk about. Phil Spencer believes Kinect was one of Xbox's biggest contributions to gaming. If you guys remember, Kinect was the little camera that would, they used for some of the games. Two questions for you guys to discuss amongst yourselves. One, is he right? Do you agree with Phil Spencer? As head of Xbox, I guess his opinion on this carries some weight. But two, the broader question of, do you need to be does a product need to be a success for it to be a major contribution to gaming? Because I would argue Kinect was not that successful, right? Like who's still here is using a Kinect? Probably no one. Jeff, start with you. Let me load up YouGov in the meantime.
I guess to answer the second question, I don't think that necessarily it's a prerequisite that like something has to be successful to make a contribution. Obviously, things can come before their time, and maybe, like for example, I may be butchering this, but wasn't the Dreamcast like fairly early on online technology and being connected? And obviously that the Dreamcast never amounted to anything, but clearly some of the things it brought in were important later. You could think of other examples, not necessarily in gaming. Like I remember when I watched the 30 for 30 on the XFL, which was awesome. They talked all about how a lot of the camera technology and the production and sort of how they created stories around the league, like that all was brought in to the NFL after the XFL folded. So I think as just a general business thing, your point is correct. On the Kinect, I will pass the line on that. I'll take my pass because I'm not really sure.
Jimmy?
Yeah, I had a Kinect. I always had a Kinect actually from when they offered it to, I can't even remember when I stopped using one. I don't play on my Xbox anymore. But to your point, it doesn't have to be a success for it to be a contribution. It just had to have had a positive impact. And I love the Dreamcast reference, Jeff, because I loved my Dreamcast. And there were some great titles on that from, I believe, like the original 2K series and Soul Calibur, which I used to play on my Dreamcast all the time. It was a great, great console. But anyways, I even used my Kinect with the Xbox Twitch app to start streaming and having my video on the stream because I didn't have a sophisticated setup at the time. I eventually elevated and got a proper webcam. I got an Elgato capture card, the external one that you can use with your console. But all that kind of pointing back to the Kinect and facilitating, I think, a new way to think about not just portraying ourselves on stream, for console gamers that weren't even thinking along those lines while PC gamers were. But maybe Phil Spencer's talking about also the game innovation, right? And having these move you type games where people would get up and dance. The Kinect would monitor them and, mirror that with their avatars that, Sony, I think, replicated with those kind of joysticky things. Sorry, I was never big on Sony except for PS2. I don't know.
They were like ice cream cones. They
were like giant, ice cream cones. Or microphones even, but still, to Phil Spencer's point, Kinect was awesome. It didn't work great. I remember there was some sports games, and Jeff, maybe you did this with Madden or 2K, but you could use the Kinect to take a picture of yourself and then let it render for 4 hours, and then you would have a custom character in the game that looked just like you. And for people that played, the My 2K profiles that loved creating that, it was kind of like an RPG element of playing 2K. You could have this basketball player that looked like you because of the Kinect. So, the tech was innovative and ahead of its time in terms of what it hoped to accomplish, but it definitely pushed the conversation and the way of thinking forward, right? In terms of what are we getting out of these consoles, and what should we be thinking of for what we want next? Lindsay, I see you unmuted, so hop in.
Yeah, I was going to say on his point on accessibility, I couldn't remember what the Kinect did in that area, but it was one of the first voice enabled devices. And it had a lot for people who had difficulty, who had vision impairments, or who had, there was several other ones. Like they made it very adaptable to people who were in wheelchairs to read motion and all kinds of other things and that was pretty novel in the gaming market at the time that the Kinect was released. So I do think that he's right in that it made a big splash in terms of highlighting those communities and actually creating a product meant for those communities. Do I think it was the most revolutionary product of the past decade? That's where he loses me a little bit, but this
Well, he said
was
one of, so I give him
And Xbox,
yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah, and it's fine. I mean, he works there, and it's good to brag about your own stuff. I say that as someone who announced the drop of their podcast at the very beginning of this, so not hating on him too much for that. But yeah, I think that he's right in that the Connect didn't necessarily, it wasn't the product that was going to carry us to the new millennium, but it was an important step forward for the industry as a whole and led to a lot of other cool innovations, especially when it comes to voice technology. So pretty neat.
yeah, I think like the accessibility stuff was mentioned in the article, Lindsay. So you're spot on there.
Mhm.
Like, but also just I think people don't realize like the motion tracking that like in the when we have these discussions around next generation gaming and more immersive experiences, like a lot of it is the talk around VR. And I think one of the major things that Oculus, like the Quest and Oculus, brought to the world was the ability to do motion tracking without um, having the satellites in your room, right? Like without having to put cameras around a room. But the Kinect really sort of pioneered that motion tracking in general in a consumer gaming device, right? So what will be sort of a foundational element of next gen VR and even current gen VR, I would argue, was really pioneered here. Trent says, I've heard there was a good amount of commercial application use for the Kinect. I just don't know why it never worked for me. It was really, really tough to get working correctly. Like,
Yeah.
you're spot on, Trent. Half the time it did not work that well. Trent says, I tried to use the Kinect for facial scan in NBA 2K. It made me look like a swamp monster. Trent, I think that's every facial scan in NBA 2K. If you've ever watched XQC go through that process every time he's played a new NBA game, it's actually hilarious. The clips of him on Twitch doing that are really funny. 4X Esports says, Kinect had a great hacker following for the PC kit to be used in many interesting scanning, gesture, and motion sensing applications. Yeah. This is what I think that's what I was alluding to, that the hardware and that functionality really was quite groundbreaking in a consumer device. Usually that tech was, orders of magnitude more expensive.